Hi there. So I'm joined today by Jelle van Geuns, CEO of Cirra AI and two-time App Exchange founder. Welcome, Jelle.
Hey, Scott. Thank you. Good to be here.
Great. So tell us a little bit about Cirra AI. What does the app do? Who is it for? And what problem does it solve?
Yeah, so Cirra AI is a set of AI agents for Salesforce admins and consultants. So we're helping to automate the grunt work, the stuff that takes a lot of time but doesn't really require a lot of thinking or expertise. So generating metadata, provisioning users, all those kind of basic admin steps that get in the way of actually serving the end customer and creating business value.
Giving admins back a lot of time. I'm sure that's much appreciated.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's our goal. You shouldn't have to basically go into the Salesforce setup UI pretty much ever again once we get everything working.
Oh man. All right, that's a bold claim. I love that. All right, so give us an idea of your current state. What's current revenue, team size, customer count?
So we're still pretty early stage. We have a few pilot customers using the product. A lot of people have expressed interest. We're working through like some of the final kinks to basically deliver on the vision that we're sketching out. So small team, like 6 people altogether. Me, VP sales, marketing agency, and advisor, and a couple offshore developers.
Cool. And how did you first come up with the idea for Cirra AI?
So it actually came, during the provisioning and deployment of customers from my previous company. Many times you'd see long delays, even for like simple configuration changes that had to be made. Um, you know, Weeks, sometimes months, just to get like a field added or the formula adjusted. People didn't really know what was in there. A lot of duplication, technical debt, and teams essentially overwhelmed, just trying to keep the ship afloat and like unable to really process anything new. So that's really detracting from the value of Salesforce because it becomes kind of a bottleneck rather than an enabler of agility, which it should be.
Right. I think a lot of people are probably nodding their heads right now listening to that. You mentioned it kind of was born out of your other company, and I want to get to that in a minute. But this was decisions on demand that you're referring to, yes?
Yeah, that's right.
hmm Well, I want to chat with you about that in a moment because I know that was also an App Exchange product and company with a successful story. So we're going to transition to that in a minute. But going back to Cirra AI, how did you once you came up with the idea? How did you go about validating it in the market?
Yeah, so the first step is we send out some bulk emails to likely potential customers just to ask what they were experiencing, what the main issues were, um, and what the key pain points were that we could help them resolve. And that in parallel with some technical validation, it's all based on underlying LLMs and tool calling and stuff like that.
hmm
So we had to do a bunch of due diligence on what is actually possible and what does it take to plug Salesforce into those LLMs successfully.
hmm
And that's obviously an ongoing thing because stuff is evolving so quickly.
hmm
But once we kind of got the sense that technically it would be feasible, then we could get to like really refining the use cases, and that's still an ongoing process. Like every time we talk to a customer, come across a real life use case, there's more little edge cases that emerge, and we're really trying to make sure that essentially almost all the time the experience is like, wow, the tool actually figured that out, and even if it didn't get it right the first time, it kind of auto corrects, learns from the error message, and then tries something different, and eventually gets it right. And that's a pretty magical experience when it does work. Um,
Yeah,
Trying to get to as high a percentage as possible of those magical experiences.
that's awesome. That's awesome. So, and did you bootstrap Cirra AI or did you go the fundraising route?
So far, it's bootstrapped. I've won one small angel investor, and some suppliers and vendors that have kind of deferred some of their compensation for it.
Hmm.
But we are going to be doing a fundraising round pretty soon. Once we get our product fully launched, and initial traction firmly established, then we'll do that.
Hmm. Did you, and with your previous organization, Decisions on Demand, did you fundraise that for that venture as well, or was that bootstrapped?
No, that was fully bootstrapped. We had some revenue based or revenue backed debt at some point to help scale a little bit and smooth out some of the ebbs and flows. But no institutional funding.
So how did you, I know you said that to date you're still bootstrapped, but I'm curious because I think this is a decision a lot of founders struggle with. Um, how did you decide this go around that you're probably not going to go the bootstrapping route? Was it just about kind of the timing that bootstrapping would take?
Yeah, definitely. It's takes a lot more time, and right now there's a market opportunity that is very present, and the
Sure,
momentum is very critical.
sure.
Um, so we felt that, or I feel that right now the time is right to accelerate. I think we have a product. It's not perfect yet, but it's getting very close to being a really cool experience and very productive tool. And so we want to accelerate and double down on that, integrate it better into workflows, connect with Jira, Slack, etc., to really make it easy to use and fully integrated for people.
Cool. Yeah, I think that's smart too. Obviously, if you wait until it is perfect, you'll probably have missed the market opportunity, right? So I think you're right to try and strike while the iron's hot. Well, I know Sierra is still early days, but I want to like pause and kind of pivot to talk a little bit about decisions on demand, because I think that's a really interesting story for folks to hear as well. Um, so, with decisions on demand, can you give a quick background of that as well? Like, what problem that solution was solving and who it was for?
Yes. So initially, it started out being a rules engine for Salesforce. So I
Hmm.
had a background in building business rules engines in the previous company that later got acquired by IBM. Not my company. It was a mid-sized company that I was an early employee for. Um, so I tried to take that experience of a generic rules engine into the Salesforce ecosystem. So it turned out that that wasn't easy to sell. And this was 13 years ago. So at the time, architectural technology components, people couldn't really grasp that mostly.
Hmm.
So they're really looking for specific point solutions, and it turns out that the point solution that people really gravitated towards was lead assignment. Um, right now there's a lot of lead assignment vendors. At the time, there were not as many.
Sure. 2012 was a very different time to be building on not the platform entirely, but certainly App Exchange too.
Yeah, so we kind of listened to the customers and pivoted towards semi-pivoted towards using the rules engine for that. So the underlying technology gave us some differentiation
Hmm.
in terms of being able to handle some fairly complicated use cases. And we built a layer of specific capabilities around lead assignment and other types of assignment as well on top of that. So it turned out, ended up being a pretty flexible and powerful tool that people, embedded quite deeply into their workflows.
Great. Well, and I know this is going back a long ways, but do you recall how you gained your early customers with Decisions on Demand?
Yeah, it was initially mainly through combination of word of mouth, going to events and stuff, and meeting people, as well as App Exchange. So, we fairly quickly had a listing on the App Exchange, and at the time that was still productive.
Hmm.
Um, I'm not sure if it works the same way today, but there weren't as many vendors, and so people would just kind of try out different solutions they found, and through a combination of building some rapport and trust during initial calls, and other capabilities, things that the flexibility I mentioned, that we had some differentiation against other vendors. So I managed to land a bunch of companies, initially smaller ones, but we ended up signing some major insurance companies, ADP, Fortune 500 companies using the product.
Wow, that's a nice logo to have. And so you mentioned going to events. Is this Salesforce throwing events like Dreamforce, or were you? I'm trying to remember when the earliest community events started, the Dreamin' events. I
Yeah,
don't know if
well,
they
there
were
were
around back then.
definitely a mix. Dreamforce, yes, but um, it can be hard to meet the right people at Dreamforce because there's just so
Sure,
much going on.
sure.
More productive is the smaller events, community meetings, just related meetups, even that doesn't have to be specifically Salesforce, but people with similar, in a similar domain, sales ops related stuff.
Hmm.
Um, so that was useful, and it's also a good way to meet people who can give you good feedback, and through those connections, a couple of customers came in that way, but mainly was App Exchange, and later our website. Um, we had some success with content marketing. It takes a long time to bear fruit, but when it does, sometimes it can be those are the better deals that come in that way.
That's great. So early days, App Exchange and the events, and then over time, some SEO and content marketing is what drove some of those larger deals. Sounds like.
Yeah. So definitely the content marketing. If you put some effort into building like real collateral that actually tells a meaningful story and is kind of specific, not
Hmm.
just the buzzwords that are ranked highest on Google, but there are some very specific things. We had good success because once people find that, if they're looking for that specific thing, the traffic is not going to be high, but when people do find it and you tell pretty much exactly the story that they have in their head, that obviously immediately builds a bunch of trust, and you can based on that kind of build a relationship as really an advisor, not just a tool vendor.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
these are typically projects that will involve some consulting effort, and it's not like just put in your credit card and sell it kind of thing,
Hmm.
but they can be quite lucrative.
Hmm. Yeah. I mean, the more you target, I'd say your messaging, the narrower your audience, but maybe the better your conversion rate is going to be for folks that are in that market that you're targeting, right?
Yeah, exactly, and because Salesforce has so many of these little areas, like territory management. Not
Sure.
everybody uses it, but if they do, then it's a very specific thing, and many tools kind of out of the box don't fully support that.
Hmm.
So if you do pretty much fully support that, or offer a little bit of customization that makes it happen, then you can really solve a problem and be very sticky.
Hmm. You mentioned that the App Exchange was great for lead gen, um, and I'm curious if there was anything you were doing specifically to try and optimize for that. I know there's uh, the co-marketing program, or the App Exchange marketing program. I think it's been renamed a few times, but where you can partner with Salesforce to promote your listing.
Mm.
Were you all taking advantage of any of those, or was it all just organic, people finding you through the App Exchange search?
I mean, the key thing is to make sure that like you show up for the right keywords, and that
Hmm.
it's very clear from the beginning like what you do.
Hmm.
And we struggled a little bit with that in the beginning because I mentioned it was kind of this general purpose rules engine, and it was hard to say, okay, it's just a lead assignment product. But if you're on App Exchange, that's what you need to do. Like if you even need to, you can create multiple listings potentially, and target each one towards a specific application. But it cannot be like a wishy-washy kind of half in between thing. It has to target a specific use case, and everything has to be focused on that. Um, and that's the only way that it really works. So the AMP program, we did a few. I wouldn't say it was a resounding success.
No, okay.
I'm not sure that's the fault of the program or the way that we did it, but that didn't really clearly translate into revenue for us. But that was later in the life of the company, so maybe kind of the impact of the app exchange had already started to wane a little bit.
Are there any other lessons you learned along the way? Any lessons you learned the hard way, maybe I should say, that experiments you ran that didn't really go the way you had hoped?
Um, I mean, I think that the key thing is is the focus, and even if you think that your product can be used for many different things,
Mm-hmm.
you cannot position it that way on at least on not on App Exchange, because you have such a limited amount of real estate. Like on a website, you have a little bit more flexibility. You can potentially do different landing pages or whatever, but even then it's hard. So it's better to really ruthlessly focus, and then you can always kind of expand from there.
Mm-hmm.
And that can be hard though at the beginning if you don't really know what the use case is, and you don't want to close the door on other stuff. But the moment you have that kind of clear signal, you really need to do that. Other lessons learned. Yeah, I mean, and we might get into this a little bit, but if you're bootstrapping, you obviously have fewer resources, and so there's some trade-off there in terms of the amount of bandwidth you can throw at problems and the amount of money as well. So I
Mm-hmm.
don't really have experience in managing large marketing budgets and where that goes. I would say if you're going to do anything around Dreamforce, the productive way to do it is without a ton of money is to work with some other vendors, try to organize a little event or something on the side, where
Oh,
at least you can
interesting.
invite people to come over. You have some presence, you have a specific spot where you can tell people to come and meet you, rather than saying, well, we'll figure it out on
Yes.
um, which is really hard. I mean, still worthwhile, but it's harder to do. So for much less money, you can still have some sort of presence and actually meet like customers and prospects face to face. That's easier if you do it together with other vendors as well.
Yeah, that's smart. Partnering up when the budget isn't there, that's just kind of a clever way of stretching those dollars further.
Yeah.
So, were there any other partnerships that y'all utilized to like working with SI vendors, for instance, for implementing your application? Or
Um, that for decisions on demand, we were never like able to get that to work
Hmm,
fully. I think in part because our product was a little bit niche and more focused on the more complex implementations, so the volumes were not high enough to really train SI partners.
mm-hmm,
We did work productively with SIs that were incumbent, and that sometimes led to some follow up business, but it was never like a formal thing. Same thing for working with Salesforce. Some deals would come in through Salesforce architects that were looking for solutions and that try different things. And we work with them to get into the account and to use the stamp of approval from Salesforce essentially um, to get past the initial trust barriers.
hmm.
Um, but that also wasn't like a formal thing. It was just like one off for individual people.
So that was always Salesforce would reach out to y'all. There was no, because I know that's something that's kind of the prize everyone's after oftentimes is getting their app in front of Salesforce AEs and SEs. I think a lot of partners get approved for get through security review, get their listing up there, and they expect the deals to just pour in their lap from Salesforce.
Yeah, I can't can't say that I know how how to do that. I know some people have success with it. I think the main thing is that it has to be simple. It has to help them, close a deal faster, get over an objection.
Yep.
Um, it's not about the compensation that they might get for selling your app. That's really, it's not the main motivator or even a significant motivator. It's really about like, okay, can you help close a deal that they're working on by taking away like a little objection and as easily as possible. So we did work like on a one-off basis, productively with the Salesforce sales team to do that in some cases, but it was never a scalable thing really.
Sure. I think it's probably all about having those initial early wins when they do reach out to you, and then you can become a trusted vendor, right? I don't know if there is a way to get in front of them otherwise.
Yeah, and it depends on the product. If you have a product that's maybe geared towards the bigger deals and the more complex situations, then by default the volume is going to be much less. If you have something that's like in the old days anyway, like a DocuSign or something that that's just kind of required for every deal with certain type and not done by Salesforce at all, then it would be obvious for them to reach out. For us, like we were doing lead assignment, and technically Salesforce does lead assignment, right? Except that
Hmm.
not really. It doesn't work for anybody, and it's a token feature. But the salespeople don't really want to say that during the sales cycle because it's on the data sheet, like it does lead assignment. Um, so yeah, and then there were also a couple other vendors that were like already somewhat established when we started, so they had more visibility to the sales team. So that was one reason why for us it didn't work. But doesn't mean that it can't work for other people.
Sure. And so it sounded like you were getting a lot of inbound um, from the app exchange from your website. Were you doing any uh, specific outbound tactics to drive leads and revenue?
Um, for decisions on demand, not as much. Recently we've done more. LinkedIn outbound. We did some outbound email, like I said, the cold email, really just asking for advice. So by no means am I a cold email expert, but my takeaway is that what works is really just asking for advice, not trying to sell. The moment people
Mm,
smell a mass email and an unsolicited one, and they smell some sort of a sales effort behind it, and same thing is true for LinkedIn outreach. People are happy to connect and even to provide advice and stuff like that. But the moment there's any kind of a sense of like you're trying to sell, then uh, the door closes very quickly.
sure. Yeah, especially now that it's easier for these messages to be blasted out so quickly. I think a lot of people's inboxes are full. So coming with a genuine voice and asking for help rather than dollars, I think probably goes a long way.
Yeah, and then not only as a tactic, but as like a genuine thing. If you want to learn, and or you want to show people something, but not with the expectation that you're going to be selling to them.
Hmm.
Um, and if the product does what it's supposed to do and it solves a problem, then those sales will eventually follow. But trying to sell too hard, especially on a one-to-one basis, is yeah, it's hasn't worked for us. Let's say anyway.
Sure. Yeah. Um, well, let's talk about pricing for a minute. How did you land on your initial pricing for? Maybe we'll start with decisions on demand. How did you land on your initial pricing, and did it evolve over time at all? And if so, how?
Um, yes, I'm trying to remember. It's a long time ago, but
Sure.
um, Yeah, so the pricing model that that worked out best was like a per seat licensing, um, because that kind of aligns with the way people are used to paying for Salesforce. So it's somewhat predictable. Um, it's not a mental adjustment, and it's they don't have to try to anticipate like how many transactions they'll try to run or anything like that. It's also easy to manage, easy to measure. Um, Definitely, like two things that we learned is one is, once you're past the immediate need of like you have to sell something to somebody at any cost, essentially. Um, selling to smaller deals is really not worth it unless you have like a true, simple, high velocity product. In
Mm,
which case, like it should be truly simple and high velocity and low touch. But if you have to get engaged with customers and especially if there's any kind of ongoing support commitment, then those small deals will end up biting you big time. And so you spend almost as much time sometimes with the 5 seats as you do with 1,000,
yep.
and it's really not
Yes.
worth it.
I've heard that sometimes the bigger players actually expect less support, oftentimes, in some of the smaller deals.
It could be because they have more in-house expertise and are able to do things better and kind of at least figure out what they're asking before they start asking.
Hmm.
Whereas the smaller ones, like the moment something goes wrong, it's like they pick up the phone to whoever will answer, and if you're responsive, you pick up the phone, then you're on the hook for doing whatever it is that they want done. And it's you can't charge them a lot for it, if at all. So it's really it can be very tedious, and so that doesn't work for a somewhat configurable and configured product. It can work if people just put in a credit card, buy your product, use it entirely by themselves. And it's all like self-service, great. But if it requires any kind of hand holding, then that's not worth doing. And the second is, don't be afraid to charge higher. Um, Usually, once people have kind of, especially for these somewhat bigger deals, if they've gone through the whole process of evaluating a vendor and all that, and you're solving a problem for them, then sometimes even if it's double the price, it really doesn't matter.
Mm,
Um, Obviously there's an upper bound to that, but start higher than you feel comfortable with, um, and then you can always narrow it down unless you have a very specific competitor that you're facing off against and they do exactly the same thing for a certain price. Then obviously that's a constraint. But if again, if there's some configuration and hand holding and customization, then charging more for that is often not really a bottleneck.
sure. I think sometimes for larger companies, they feel more constrained by time than dollars, right? And so if you raise your price a little bit, it's not gonna concern them as much as maybe a smaller organization.
Yeah, exactly. That's not the main issue. Of course, it has to be somewhat reasonable, but and they might negotiate, but sometimes the negotiation is performative, so it doesn't matter like what the actual number is that you end up with. It's just the percentage that it has to go down. So if you start at your actual price and you still have to go down from there, then that's you're eating that. Whereas if you start at double and negotiate down, you can show a lot more flexibility.
You mentioned, that sometimes the smaller deals, they're picking up the phone for support. You also talked about the early days, some of the sales almost turn into consulting projects. Um, how do you how did you draw the line, between, this is support that we're going to build out for you, and this is like where our service ends and your in-house team needs to pick it up? How did you prevent, scope creep from what was expected of your team?
Yeah, I mean that evolved a bit. In the beginning, you're kind of learning and fixing the product as you go along, and so
Hmm.
it's fine to do more work than is in scope, because you're building a better product, and the customer is being tolerant by letting you do that.
Hmm.
Um, Down the road, It's just standard, like trying to scope out acceptance criteria, assumptions, making sure that the basic stuff is there, that you have an environment to work in, you have access to that environment, that the data is kind of there,
Hmm.
and making sure that that's stated as an assumption. So at the very least, you can clearly say, look, it's not our responsibility to create test data for for your specific use cases. That has to come from you. And yes, it's maybe a little bit of work, but if you want to test it, then that's what you're going to have to do. Um, other stuff that is around the product. If you don't have the access to do that, and you don't really want to change anything that is like in the customer Salesforce configuration, because you don't know what the side effects might be. So you really have to build a partnership with both the business users and the IT folks that will be actually deploying it. So there's a fine line, like write it down, write your assumptions down, and make it clear. But you have to have some flexibility. You don't want to spend like 3 months creating the SOW to end all SOWs if that might cost you the deal as well. And plus, it's still going to change. You're going to spend time negotiating more, and you don't want to do that either. You want to be productive, be clear, and build a relationship where it's accepted that you do your thing, and they're responsible. Customers responsible for providing the context, and
Sure.
and everybody understands that from the beginning.
Do you have any advice? This is kind of a follow up to that. Do you have any advice for folks that are receiving a lot of customer feedback and want to make sure they're building still something that has mass market appeal? Because in the early days, when you have only a few voices whispering in your ear, you could misinterpret what is great, a great idea for a feature roadmap, when in reality it's just something that one or two organizations need, and you could end up pigeonholing your solution for a corner of the market that you don't want to be in.
Yeah, definitely. So um, one is like, try not to mistake your own ideas of what might be useful for what the customer is actually saying.
Hmm.
Of course, you have to kind of be a little bit visionary in moving things forward, and sometimes they won't tell you from the beginning exactly what they need, but don't go too far down that, and make sure you have some validation for what you're building, and try to keep it simple.
Hmm.
Um, um, yeah, I don't think there's 100% like cut and dried formula. You have to use some judgment. Like, does this seem like it's something that the bulk of customers are gonna benefit from, or is it really a one-off thing? And if
Hmm.
it's one-off, then try to build a boundary. Like an App Exchange product can be extensible. You can build in customization points where you can even add like custom code.
Hmm.
And initially, you can start off, and we did this. Like, we built a fair amount of custom code because the stuff was not in the product, and then over time, kind of migrate a lot of that into the product, which can be a pain also, because that code, someone has to maintain it, and since you wrote it, you're kind of on the hook for that. And if you have too many variations of that, it becomes difficult to migrate it back. But if you manage that well, then it can be a good way to quickly serve your customer today. Learn what works. If you do it 2 or 3 times and you're essentially copy pasting the same thing, then that's a good indication that that it could be a product feature. Um, and you still maintain some sort of a boundary, that you don't put too many things in the product that may not ever be be valid for a mass market.
Hmm. That's good advice. I want to transition a bit to team and hiring. We were talking earlier, and you were mentioning that Decisions on Demand had grown to be a remote team. So you were managing how many individuals?
I mean,
For
at the peak, probably like 10, 12,
okay, like US based or just all around the world or
all around the world. Um, we had a couple of US based people to help with customer support
hmm
and the sales,
hmm
and a bunch of offshore developers for building the product and doing QA and some customer bespoke implementation for customers, as well as marketing, building the collateral, etc. So
is there
that was US based.
any challenge having a remote team like that? It's spread across many time zones.
Um, yeah, of course, the standard challenges that involves late night calls often, and there's communication barriers.
hmm
It's hard for people that are in a different country that don't necessarily, first of all, not 100% understand the culture here, but definitely don't interact with customers or salespeople or sales ops people on a day-to-day basis to understand like what's important and what's not. So um, so you have to bear that in mind, and kind of I was acting as the product manager more or less,
hmm
um, to try to spec it out in a way that is very clear but doesn't prescribe too much of the technical implementation as well. Um, try to establish communication between people and not always be the bottleneck, and not once people on the team, even in different locations, start talking to each other and helping each other, brainstorming with each other and solving like smaller problems, then that takes it off your plate. So um, definitely encourage that team culture, even if it's remote, and encourage
Yeah,
people to talk to each other. So Slack is obviously great for that.
I was gonna
Um,
say I bet that was a lot harder back then because that was pre Slack. So I mean, these are Skype chats, maybe. I don't know what
yeah, I mean Slack
medium
is. I
y'all
can't
would have
remember
been
when
using.
exactly Slack came out, but we were definitely early user. Um,
We were
um,
using Slack with decisions on demand.
oh yeah, definitely.
Okay, I didn't realize they were around in 2012.
Well, maybe not at the very beginning. Like I said, I can't remember exactly when it came out, but
hmm
once you started having a more distributed team, then definitely most of the communication was all on Slack.
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense.
Slack and GitHub, for code, Jira for tickets. We had another tool, Assembler, earlier, but
hmm
yeah, moved to Jira at some point.
Well, we talked about a few challenges already, but are there any other uh, main lessons the decisions on demand journey taught you, and that you're now applying to Sierra AI today?
Um, yeah, I think trying to involve customer feedback as early as possible.
hmm
So decisions on demand, I mainly started based on a technological or technical assumption, based on prior experience, and then kind of groped my way towards the use case incrementally, and that took some time and some unnecessary detours in terms of implementation. Um, so trying to do that better, obviously helps having had the experience with Salesforce, because I started this news on demand without any understanding of Salesforce really. I just kind of
hmm
knew it was a cool platform, but I didn't really know much about how to use it.
Plus, now I'd imagine your network in the ecosystem is just that much larger. So finding these pilot users, maybe you could reach into your own network, I imagine.
Yeah, definitely, and that there's more social validation.
hmm
So that helps. But really, trying to go after a specific use case with a clear vision. Even then, it's still always a triaging everything, and there's a lot of things that you would like to be able to do, but just don't have the bandwidth to immediately deliver. Um, yeah, and trying to focus on the marketing and the market presence earlier. So we spent more time at Cirra AI really establishing a little bit of visibility in the marketplace and reaching out to influencers and people who can get the word out, get them excited about it. Where it's decisions on demand, it was very kind of just app exchange, and that was about it.
Hmm.
So it's worth getting the message out there. You get a lot of feedback that way. People try out the product. They give tell you they don't like this, they don't like that, or they love that, or that the more interaction, the better.
Sure. For anyone listening that is maybe sold on building on the Salesforce ecosystem, but is still kind of thinking about what exactly they should build on it, what do you see as the biggest opportunities for new ISVs entering the ecosystem over the next few years?
Well, obviously anything related to Agentforce is going to get love from Salesforce. And so I think if you can figure out, some killer Agentforce based use case, and really deliver on that, and that can be any number of things. But I would say something that maybe is not like the most obvious one, because those are pretty saturated already. But something that is specific in a vertical that you know well. And that can immediately generate value without the AI having to be perfect, or without the infrastructure having to, or the data even having to be perfect. But that's just automating some piece of a workflow that is time consuming and tedious. I mean, that's generally like a good approach to finding use cases to work on. I mean, I think personally that Salesforce, the user experience, both from an end user perspective and an admin consultant perspective, is not the asset of the platform, let's say. And so anything that builds a novel way of interacting with the platform that does not involve going through the default user interfaces. I mentioned we're trying to basically make setup UI obsolete. And I
I
think
know a
the
lot of
same
people will
is
be happy about that.
hopefully, same is I think true for, for the main user interface of Salesforce. That few people that I've ever met really love entering data in Salesforce, especially not salespeople. So AI does offer up many opportunities, and people I know are already working on this, but to interact with the core platform without having to actually physically interact with the user interfaces. So if you can do that, and especially kind of make it super smooth, integrated, so you don't have to retype everything, but into an existing workflow, and just kind of make it magically work while the data still ends up in Salesforce in a structured way. There's opportunities there, I believe.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. That sounds cool. And even Salesforce is starting, not starting. They've been building out more seamless integration with Slack, right, and things like that. So you could be living off platform and still populate that important CRM data into the platform.
Yeah,
So
I was at another event the other day, and one of the speakers mentioned pretty interesting insight. I thought that, rather than trying to making the existing process smoother, kind of think about how can AI really kind of prevent the need for the process in the first place. So, like, rather than like automating the resolution of a support ticket, basically anticipate that something might be going wrong and give users advice, or even just do the thing for them, so that there's no need for a support ticket in the first place. And there's a lot of, I think, opportunities to really kind of step back and say, okay, how can we be more proactive? How can the AI be more proactive and not just supportive
Sure.
or even agentic?
So, sort of
Um,
preventative medicine type mentality.
yeah, exactly. Like, don't even let it go wrong, or don't even let this task become a task that somebody has to do. Just do it. And there's some stuff that's emerging already. Like, there's integration between note taker apps and tools like HubSpot where tasks just automatically appear
Hmm.
if they've been listed as action items in a call transcript. So a lot more like that is probably going to happen. The sales side as well.
Well, okay, that's interesting. I also wanted to ask if you could go back and talk to yourself before you were starting decisions on demand, or perhaps just from the frame of mind of talking to an early founder now. What's one thing they should know, or you wish you had known before embarking on the ISV journey with Salesforce?
So I guess it's important to know that everything always takes longer than you think it will that it will take. Um, the other the other thing that's important is, like, if you are building, as you are building, you will find, if as long as you're a little bit open to feedback, and as long as you're working with actual people who are trying to use your product or using your product, um, you will eventually end up building something that is that is useful and has an audience, and people will enjoy using that product. So um, keep definitely keep listening, and keep focusing on working with customers as much as possible, as soon as possible, and solving their problems, like end to end. Um,
Sure.
and then something solid will come out of it. You may not know exactly what it is, um, but don't give up too soon, basically.
Yeah. Staying customer focused makes a lot of sense.
Customer
Well,
focused, and trust that you'll figure it out, as long as you do that.
yeah. Well, Yella, this has been a joy. Thank you so much for coming on. I'm sure folks want to learn more about you and Sierra AI. So, what's the best way for them to learn more about Sierra AI?
All right, the best way is to go to our website, Cirra.ai, and click on the book a demo link. There's also a free trial if you want to try the product out. And you can always reach out to me as well, Jelle@Cirra.ai, or on LinkedIn. There's only one Jelle van Geuns, I think, that will show up. So easy to find.
Ju-
Hit me up, and I'll be happy to chat anytime.
Well, even though there's only one, just in case, we'll link that up in the show notes so people can reach out easily. Well, thank you so much again, and best of luck with Sierra AI.
Well, thanks so much, Scott. It was really great talking to you, and enjoyed the conversation. So thanks again.
Me too. Cheers. Bye.
Bye.